You're not high anymore. You're lying in bed and your legs won't stop moving. Not twitching, not cramping, something worse. A crawling sensation under your skin that makes you want to rip your legs off. You kick them. You stretch them. You walk around the room. Nothing helps. Your bones ache like they're breaking from the inside. Your back feels like someone is twisting your spine. Every joint in your body is screaming. You're sweating through your sheets, but you're freezing. You pile on blankets and you're still shivering so hard your teeth are chattering. You throw them off because suddenly you're burning up. Then you're cold again. You haven't slept in 2 days. Your stomach is trying to turn itself inside out. You've thrown up everything. Then you dry heave. Then you throw up bile. Then nothing comes up, but you're still retching, doubled over the toilet, crying. And the worst part, the part that makes you want to die, is that you know exactly how to make it stop. One hit. That's all it would take. One hit and all of this disappears in 30 seconds. But you don't have any. And you don't have money. And even if you did, you promised yourself you were done. So you're lying here, feeling like you're dying, knowing you're not, knowing this is going to last for days. And knowing that even if you make it through this, even if you survive the withdrawal, your brain is going to spend the next year trying to convince you to go back. Because heroin didn't just make you feel good, it rewired the part of your brain that decides what matters. And now, nothing else does. The first time you did heroin, you weren't trying to ruin your life. You were trying to feel better. Maybe it was physical pain, an injury, a surgery, a prescription that ran out. Maybe it was emotional pain, depression, trauma, a weight you'd been carrying for years that nothing else could touch. It doesn't matter. What matters is that heroin worked. Not like other drugs, not like alcohol that makes you numb or weed that makes you slow or stimulants that make you jittery and anxious. Heroin made everything okay. Not good, not exciting, just okay. Like someone reached into your chest and turned off the alarm that had been screaming your entire life. The pain stopped. The anxiety stopped. The constant background noise of being you stopped. For the first time and maybe ever, you felt peaceful, warm, safe, like nothing bad could touch you. And that's the hook. Not the euphoria, not the high, the relief. Because your brain wasn't designed to feel that kind of peace. Not naturally, not all at once, and definitely not from a drug. But heroin forces it. It floods your brain with chemicals that your body normally releases in tiny, controlled amounts. Endorphins, dopamine, chemicals that are supposed to reward you for survival behaviors, eating, bonding, accomplishing something meaningful. Heroin releases all of them at once, in amounts your brain has never experienced, and it does it instantly. Within seconds of entering your bloodstream, heroin crosses into your brain and locks onto opioid receptors like a key sliding into a lock. These receptors exist because your body makes its own opioids, natural painkillers that help you cope with injury and stress. But heroin is stronger, much stronger. It doesn't just activate those receptors, it floods them, overwhelms them, triggers a cascade of pleasure and relief so intense that your brain essentially says, this is the most important thing that has ever happened. And it remembers. Your brain logs that experience as critical survival information. It files heroin under the same category as food, water, and safety. It marks it as necessary, and from that moment on, a part of your brain is always looking for it. Here's the problem. Your brain is designed to adapt. When something happens repeatedly, your brain adjusts. It recalibrates, tries to maintain balance. So when you flood your opioid receptors over and over, your brain stops making its own endorphins. Why would it? You're getting them from an outside source now. The system shuts down. And it doesn't stop there. Your brain also reduces the number of opioid receptors. Too much stimulation, so it pulls some offline, down-regulates them, makes itself less sensitive. This is tolerance. Now you need more heroin to feel the same effect. Not because you're chasing a better high, because your brain has physically changed in response to the drug. The dose that made you feel warm and peaceful a month ago now barely does anything. So you use more, and your brain adjusts again, and you need even more. But here's where it gets worse. While your brain is down-regulating pleasure, it's also becoming dependent. Heroin isn't just sitting on top of your brain's natural systems. It's replaced them. Your brain has stopped producing its own endorphins. It's reduced its own opioid receptors. It's restructured its reward circuitry around an external chemical. So now, when the heroin wears off, you don't go back to normal. You go below normal, Because your brain can't compensate anymore. It's lost the ability to regulate pain, mood, and stress on its own. And that's when withdrawal starts. Not because the heroin is poisoning you, but because your brain is trying to function without something it now needs to survive. Withdrawal feels like your body is rejecting itself. It starts subtle, a vague unease, restlessness, irritability. You feel cold, then hot, then cold again. You can't get comfortable. Your skin feels wrong. You start sweating even though you're freezing. Your nose runs. Your eyes water. You yawn constantly even though you're not tired. And then the pain starts. Not sharp pain, not localized. A deep, bone-level ache that spreads through your entire body. Your legs hurt. Your back hurts. Your arms feel like they're being twisted. It's called bone pain, but it's not really your bones. It's your nerves. Your brain has lost its ability to regulate pain signals, so now everything hurts. Your muscles are cramping. Your joints are aching. Your body is screaming for relief, and there's nothing you can do. You can't sleep. Every time you close your eyes, your legs start moving involuntarily. Restless leg syndrome times 100. You have to kick them, stretch them, walk, but nothing helps. You're nauseous, but also starving. You can't eat. You try and you vomit immediately. Your stomach is cramping so hard you're doubled over. You have diarrhea. Not once, for days. Your body is trying to purge something that isn't there anymore. You're shaking, sweating, freezing, crying, and your brain is screaming at you that there's a solution. One hit, just one, and all of this stops. This isn't weakness. This isn't a lack of willpower. This is your brain in survival mode, convinced that it's dying and trying to force you to fix it. Because to your brain, heroin isn't a drug anymore. It's a requirement. Most people don't die from heroin withdrawal. It feels like you're dying, but your body can survive it. The acute phase lasts about a week. The worst of it is the first 3 to 5 days. Then it starts to ease. But here's what no one tells you. The physical withdrawal is just the beginning. After the vomiting stops, after the sweating and shaking and bone pain fade, after you can finally sleep again, your brain is still broken. Because while your opioid receptors will eventually recover, the deeper changes take months, sometimes years. Heroin didn't just affect your pain system, it rewired your reward system. The part of your brain that decides what's worth caring about, what's worth working for, what brings satisfaction, has been recalibrated around heroin. Everything else feels dull now. Flat, food doesn't taste like anything, music doesn't move you, conversations feel empty, accomplishments feel meaningless. This is called anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. It's not depression exactly, it's more like your brain's reward system has been turned down to 10% capacity. The things that used to make you happy, that used to make life worth living, don't register anymore. Because they can't compete with heroin, your brain experienced something so intensely rewarding that normal life looks gray by comparison. And even though you're not using anymore, that comparison is still there. Every day, your brain is quietly suggesting that things would be better if you went back. Not in an obvious way, not like a craving, more like a persistent background hum, a sense that something's missing, that life isn't quite right. And it's exhausting. Because you're not just fighting the urge to use, you're fighting the feeling that sobriety isn't worth it. Here's the part that makes heroin different from most other drugs. It doesn't just make you feel good. It makes everything else stop mattering. Cocaine makes you feel powerful. Alcohol makes you feel relaxed. Weed makes you feel detached. But heroin makes you feel complete. It fills a hole you didn't know you had. And once you've felt that, once your brain knows that feeling is possible, it becomes the reference point for everything else. Your brain starts comparing every experience to heroin, and everything loses. That's why people relapse months into recovery. Not because they're weak, not because they don't want to stay clean, but because their brain is still structured around heroin, still prioritizing it, still marking it as the most important thing. And one bad day, one moment of pain or stress or loneliness is all it takes for your brain to say, I know how to fix this. So you use again, and here's the cruelest part. Your tolerance dropped while you were clean. The dose you were using before the dose your body had adapted to is now an overdose. Because your brain has partially reset. Your opioid receptors have come back online. Your body isn't used to processing that much heroin anymore. So the same dose that used to just get you will now stops your breathing. That's why so many people die after relapsing. Not because they wanted to die, but because they used the amount they remembered, and their body couldn't handle it anymore. Your breathing slows, then stops. Your brain doesn't get enough oxygen, you go unconscious. And unless someone finds you in the next few minutes with naloxone, an opioid blocker that can reverse an overdose, you die. Not dramatically, not in pain, you just stop breathing and don't start again. Heroin is still killing over 10,000 people a year in the US alone. Not because people don't know it's dangerous. Everyone knows. But because by the time you realize you're addicted, your brain has already been restructured. You're not choosing to use anymore. You're fighting a system that's convinced itself heroin is survival. And every day you don't use is a day your brain is trying to convince you to go back. Not forever. The brain does heal, slowly. But it takes time, months for the physical changes to reverse, years for the psychological ones. And in the meantime, you're living in a version of yourself that doesn't feel pleasure the way it used to, that doesn't care about things the way it should, that's constantly, quietly suggesting there's an easier way. That's what makes heroin so devastating. Not that it kills you quickly, but that it reprograms you slowly. And by the time you realize what's been taken, you're already fighting to get it back. But here's what stays with you even after the brain heals. The knowledge. You know now what's possible. You know there's a chemical that can make everything okay in 30 seconds. You know that feeling exists, and you can't unknow it. Most people go through life never experiencing that kind of relief. They deal with pain and stress and anxiety using the tools they have. Therapy, medication, time, support. It's slow, it's hard, but it's all they know. You know something different now. You know there's a shortcut, and your brain has cataloged exactly where it leads and how to get there. That knowledge doesn't fade. It sits in your memory like a loaded gun in a drawer. You know it's there, you know it works. And every time life gets hard, there's a part of your brain that remembers. This is why addiction specialists talk about recovery as a lifelong process. Not because you're always physically dependent, but because the memory of heroin stays encoded in your brain's priority system. Certain places remind you of it. Certain people, certain emotions. Your brain has linked heroin to specific contexts, and those associations don't disappear just because you stop using. You walk past the corner where you used to meet your dealer and your heart rate spikes. Not because you want to use, but because your brain has marked that location as significant, as connected to something it once needed. You feel stressed and your brain reflexively suggests the solution before you consciously think about it. Not as a craving, just as an option that appears in your mind fully formed, and you have to actively reject it every time. That's the invisible work of staying clean. The constant, exhausting process of overriding your brain's suggestions, of choosing the harder path when your neurology is screaming that there's an easier one. Some people do it successfully for years, decades. They rebuild their lives, they repair relationships, they find new sources of meaning, but they never forget what heroin felt like. And they never stop knowing that it's out there. That's the permanent cost. Not just the time you lost, not just the damage to your body or your relationships or your life, but the knowledge that you experienced something your brain isn't designed to forget. And the awareness that for the rest of your life, a part of you will remember that feeling and quietly suggest that maybe, just this once, it would be okay to go back. That's why people who've been clean for 10 years can relapse in a moment of weakness. Not because they're failures, not because recovery didn't work, but because their brain still has heroin filed under solution in a way that doesn't fully erase. You can build a life around that knowledge, you can develop strategies, you can find support. But you can't make your brain forget what it learned. And that's what makes heroin different from almost any other mistake you can make. Most mistakes you learn from and move past. Heroin teaches your brain something it can't unlearn. And every day after that is a choice to live with that knowledge and not act on it.